Good evening and welcome to our LCBO virtual vegan wine tasting in partnership with the LCBO and Azuro Wines and Spirits. We do ask that you taste responsibly along with us. Tonight's going to be a great night. I'm your host, Angela Aiello, and today Chef Matthew Ravenscroft and I are discussing vegan wines and wonderful vegan recipes that are going to pair perfectly. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, Angela. Thanks for having me today.
Now, before we dive into the recipes you've created, let's talk about vegan wine. And a lot of people have questions about this, but what is the definition of vegan? A vegan person is someone who does not eat or use any animal products, including meat, fish, eggs, cheese, and honey, and also one who abstains from using any animal products such as leather. But how does this apply to wine? Now, did you know that 7.1% of Canadians are vegetarians, 2.3% of Canadians are vegan, and as a rising trend all over Canada, 2.3 million vegetarians are in Canada, up almost 30% over the last 13 years. Now, how is my wine vegan? This is a question many people are starting to ask right now. Now, winemakers have to go through a series of steps to create a wine that is smooth tasting, free of any sediment, and stable so that it can be transported around the world and brought to you clear in a bottle. Classically, animal products have been used to clarify and stabilize wine, and now vegan alternatives are being used by winemakers across the globe. Vegan-friendly wine is wine that is made in a winery without the use of any animal byproducts in the fining or filtering of the wine. So there is no egg white or gelatin used in this process. It's the winemaker's choice to use vegan agents such as bentonite clay, limestone, diatomaceous earth, charcoal, and many more options. Now, vegan certified wines. This would include the production of wine. So all in the winemaking process is vegan, as I was just talking about, but it also refers to the practices in the vineyard, in the winemaking, and then in the packaging of the bottle and the wineries themselves. Wineries are certified by a third-party audit program and display the certification on the bottle. Now, there are many other resources you can look to for information about vegan wine, such as BevVeg, vegan.org, VeggieCert, and more informational websites such as barnivore.com and vegan.com. So this is an exciting time in wine. There's lots going on. Now, I would love to hear from Matthew about why he decided to go vegan.
Right. I think for me, I think there's a lot of reasons people choose to go plant-based or plant-focused, whatever sort of range you want to have. For me, it's largely environmental. I came to realize through some reading that like the single biggest impact a person can have in terms of like environmental impact and making the world better is by choosing to eat plant-based. So me, this kind of felt like a no-brainer, just was something that already aligned with what I'm interested in. I read a statistic that was like, you could not shower for 6 months, which to be honest, doesn't sound great for anyone around you, or you could just not eat one hamburger in terms of water consumption. And that to me was this very like rocking moment that really showcased like the power of plants sort of thing. I know there's a lot of people like there's ethical reasons. Some people do it purely from a health perspective or a medical dietary needs. And there's some people who are just looking to change up how they eat, their animal intake. They want to, maybe it's a meatless Monday, maybe it's a meatless Wednesday. It can be a whatever day of the week you want. But we're just noticing that people are getting more excited about eating plants. And I think that's a huge, huge part of it. Whatever your reason is, like we salute you, we celebrate you sort of thing. I think a lot of people, when they're talking about eating plant-based, and I'm being very intentional in using the plant-based thing and talking about vegan food as well. Can I be satisfied with what I'm eating? Can I feel satiated the way that I eat a steak? And I really believe that the amount of satisfaction that you get when you're eating really comes to the amount of love and the amount of intention that you put in what you're creating. Some of the best dishes that I've had eating all over the world in some of the best restaurants, a few in particular is like I once had just this giant carrot that was just cooked with such love and took so much time to create. It's probably one of the best things that I've eaten. I think that eating vegan food, you really get a variety. You're eating a rainbow as you're trying to just consume as much as possible. I actually find I can eat more without kind of feeling like that sluggish. I used to get like meat hangovers a lot, and I've been like someone who worked at like Parts and Labor in Toronto, which is like a very meat
Mm.
focused, French focused restaurant. And now, I'm plant based. I primarily like cook all vegetables, and everything that I do, I eat all vegetables. I think it's not necessarily what you're eating, but how you're preparing it and how much you're providing yourself with. And that's kind of a big part of it. I think that, you know, broccoli can give you similar amounts of protein, not the same, not as much, but you just have to eat a little bit more. So I think it's kind of recognizing what vegetables and plants can provide for us.
Okay, now on to our recipes. Matthew, I know you have an exciting recipe for us. We have one recipe to pair with our two fresh, crisp whites here. We have the Casas del Bosque Sauvignon Blanc from Casablanca Valley over in Chile, which is a beautiful region in South America. When we think of South America wine regions, the first thing that comes to mind is hot. And the Casablanca Valley, where Casas del Bosque sits, is no exception. Actually, what makes this region so unique is the cool weather, the cool influence you get from the proximity to the Pacific. The ocean provides morning mist, and the nighttime cooling temperatures help raise the natural acidity in the grapes and adds an almost salty character to the wine. So you get all that tropical fruit by day and brisk, refreshing acidity by night. Casas del Bosque is a vintages essential, which means it's available all year round. It is the best-selling white wine from Chile in the LCBO right now. So at this price, it's really great to have a few on hand in fridge as we finally get into summer. And then we have Paco and Lola, which is from Green Spain in a place called Rías Baixas, which is a really fun word to say, two words to say. If you've never had an Albarino, this is a great one to start with. Not only do I love the label, but it's a fantastic tasting wine. Like Casas del Bosque, this is a vintages essential, so it's available all year long at the LCBO. Paco and Lola is the result of 428 grape growers in northwest Spain, working in pretty tough growing conditions to grow Albarino. The hallmarks of this grape are orchard and tropical fruit with bright acid and a faint salinity character. It's what makes it delicious. What's unique in Paco and Lola Albarino is a gentle, creamy character that comes from a winemaking technique called Lees contact. This result is a fun wine that is highly pairable and lovely to drink. But both of these wines come from sort of cooler climate. They have this coastal influence. They're fresh. The acid is high. We have these, very similar type of styles on the nose. We're looking at a little bit of tropical aromas, as well as fresh apple and pear, some stone fruit like peaches. What recipe have you paired with these two wines?
Right. So I think, I think what's really interesting about wine, in particular with vegan food, is like there's not a lot of reference for what we should be pairing with wine in terms of like vegetables. So for this, I think, it's something that's crisp, but it also has like a lot of brightness. And it also is something that I feel like is very refreshing. So we did a grilled asparagus with a leek cashew cream, a little bit of basil and pomelo. So we're getting a lot of contrasting. There's like a really rich creaminess that comes from the cashew cream. The pomelo is like this citrusy zing. And then we have like a hard char that comes from asparagus, which I think pairs really nicely. And it's very like full circle. It's very full body as well.
Yeah, I love that complementary and contrasting pairing that we have. And I think classically, there's always this pairing of asparagus and Sauvignon Blanc. That
Yeah.
has been sort of a very traditional pairing. And so you add a little bit of that cream base from the cashew, that pomelo with the acidity, and we have some very interesting dynamic sort of adventure on your palate happening with these two wines. I mean, the Albarino is a perfect way to kind of take an adventure and head over to Europe, open up your liquid passport and try a Spanish wine. And then the Sauvignon Blanc down from South America is such wonderful value too. I love the Sauvignon Blanc from Chile as well. So these complementary and contrasting pairings are so wonderful. I love that you pulled this together. The other one thing I love that you talked about is this idea of tasting the rainbow. And when it comes to wine and food pairings, I have this very unclassical way of pairing wine and food where you pair the colors of the dish with the colors of the wine. And if you just even Google, wine color charts or wine rainbow, a million colors come up for different colors that you can actually find in wine. All the way from white to rosé into different shades of red, and then into, fortified wines that tend to get orange in some ways and yellow. And so there's lots of really fun ways for us to take your theory on vegan food, tasting the rainbow, to you sort of model it into some wine tasting, and you can taste the rainbow with wine as well. I love that.
I love it. That's so cool.
Well, I think these wines are going to go really lovely from the look of that dish and the smell of this wine. I think we have a perfect pairing in mind. So nicely done. Okay, so the next one on our list is Bar Dog Chardonnay. We're headed to coastal California. We have a different texture. We have different important interactions to think of when it comes to food and wine. This broad growing region allows the winemaker to make a classic California Chardonnay every year that delivers a style that consumers want. This Chardonnay and its Cabernet Sauvignon version are both available in the LCBO wine section throughout the year. And Chardonnay is so much different than Sauvignon Blanc and Albarino, and it's so much different than the reds we have here as well. We're looking at a little more texture. We're looking at a little more weight. We're looking at a different balance. We have some oak in here. And so we have some different things to play with. What recipe did you put together for this Chardonnay?
Right. I mean, I think that there's something beautiful about this California Chardonnay where I'm picturing like the feeling of sun. There's kind of like a little bit of heat that's coming with it, but it's also like super refreshing, super crisp. So I love to do like a citrus and avocado salad, which I think is like really bright, really fresh. Again, I'm feeling like invigorated by the sun, but we also have peanuts, which adds like a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of umami, some chilies, which is like a little bit of that spice, and then some raw zucchini, which again is like that textural component. It's adding like a little bit of astringency to it at the same time, and just like bringing it full circle, kind of tying the fattiness and the citrus together, and then kind of building your meal based on that. It's not just like sad carrots and sad kale. I think I've been to a wedding before where my vegan meal was just like Roma tomatoes with red onion on it. Probably one of the most unsatisfying meals I've ever had in my life, despite the fact that like I do love tomatoes and red onions, but not for like my main course. So I think that vegan cooking encourages a lot of range in what you're eating. And I think like the first step in this is building a recipe for success. Give yourself the tools, stock your pantry with flavor. I think that like nuts and seeds, I'd say that one of the biggest challenges I have with plant-based eating is texture. It's either really fibrous and hard and crunchy, which I love, or it's soft. There's not a lot of in between. So nuts and seeds kind of provide that little breakup. It actually, I find like sometimes it can get boring chewing so much, and nuts and seeds really provides that. I think something like legumes, pulses, and beans that allows us to kind of like mimic a creaminess sometimes. It allows us to give a little bit of protein in what we're eating and like boost that thing up. Because I think a big misconception is like, how do I get all my protein? It's like from plants, the same thing that like your animal eats that you eat. It gives you protein. There's tons of ingredients that have protein in it. Once we look into it, we can realize there's tons of protein everywhere. But like if we want to make like a really creamy pasta, but we're not using milk or cheese. How do we do that? It can be like, why not blend some white beans and make a really creamy puree? I think that nutritional yeast is maybe something a lot of people aren't familiar with, but everyone who's familiar with it loves it. It goes great on popcorn. It's like a very cheesy, funky flavor. I don't know if you've had it, Angela, but it's delicious. And it's kind of something that like, it tastes like Parmesan to me. It adds a lot of like and unctuousness and umami to things, and I think that that's really like a big flavor booster.
And I love this. We're talking about salt, we're talking about plant-based fat, we're talking about spicy heat, we're talking about umami. These are all flavors that, in your mind, you can exactly pull these flavors into, a regular dish and pull them over into your plant-based dishes as well. I mean, umami is such an interesting character to bring to wine, and there's a lot of great complementary. The acid in umami helps to break that up and have a little, a great adventure on your palate. And then you add salt. If you add salt to food, I mean, salt is wine's best friend. And so, how do you feel about salt when it comes to playing around with plants
I mean, I think that anytime
on a
someone says
dish?
this doesn't taste like something, my answer is add a little bit more salt. I think it is like the basis of flavor. It just opens everything up. And it also is like that salt and wine interacting together. It really does like something magic kind of happens in that dance.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned spice, some spiciness in your foods. And I am a big believer in spice. I love spice. And when you're pairing spiciness with wine, there's something to always sort of keep in mind. The spicier your dish, the sort of the more sweeter and lower alcohol you might want your wine. So maybe be prepared if you're, depending on how much spice you use in your food, to pay attention to the wine that you're pairing with it, because you definitely want to pair something, like I said, that's lower in alcohol and maybe has a little bit of sweetness to pair with maybe a spicier dish if you are also like us and like our spicy dishes. But this wine is smelling delicious, that butteriness, that creaminess, that's going to be so complementary with the dish that you have for this.
That's so amazing. I also think like, if you want to kind of like tie everything together with what we're having, we have a little bit of wine, we have the citrus avocado salad. Don't hesitate. Hit it with a splash of that Chardonnay. Like it kind of like it ties everything together really nicely. I think that it's a totally different component that's maybe a little bit unexpected in a wine, and it's just fortifying that kind of like creaminess from the avocado with the brightness of the citrus. It brings it all together.
No, that's a great point. I love helping people learn to use wine in the kitchen because, at the end of the day, you want to pop open a bottle of wine, have a glass, maybe while you're cooking. So, how are we using that into the cooking? And I love that you said that because a splash of wine into any of these, recipes that we have help elevate that food and wine pairing. It's sort of this natural balance that comes into play between the food and the wine. So, thank you for mentioning that. The last thing I wanted to mention about the Bar Dog Chardonnay is that they raise funds for dog shelters, and so it's a great wine that gives back. What a wonderful thing for a bottle of wine to do.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. I didn't know that. That's incredible.
Okay, now we're on to our rustic Pinot Noir. We have the Portillo Pinot Noir here. Portillo Pinot Noir comes from Bogades Saleti, the largest vineyard holder in the Uco Valley. This growing region is widely considered one of the best in Argentina, and it pulls together some really stunning wines every single year. When we say Argentina wine, most people think instantly of Malbec. And while that's indeed the most important export, the wine world is starting to recognize Argentina's ability to make other wine varietals equally well, like Pinot Noir. Just like our friends at Casas del Bosque that are making really great Sauvignon Blanc thanks to hot days and cool nights, so too is Portillo. In this case, the cooling comes from altitude. Some of the vineyards are as high as 5,000 feet above sea level. This makes for a ripe Pinot with classic Bing cherry and a nice zing on the finish. Portillo Pinot Noir is available all year round at the LCBO. And I'm going to pour myself a glass in this beautiful glassware here. And you can see Pinot Noir is a pigmentally challenged grape. We tend not to get a lot of color out of it. You can see that the color is a little lighter. So this is going to change up. And sort of as we move into sort of lighter bodied whites and into a fuller bodied white, and now we're into a lighter bodied red and moving into a fuller bodied red, how this is going to impact the recipe. So what recipe, Matthew, do we have with our Pinot Noir?
So I think just in reference to your kind of like drinking the rainbow, us talking about eating the rainbow, this to me, the natural lineup is like a roasted eggplant dip. It's like it's smoky, it's charred. I think we could add like a little bit for you, a little bit for the eggplant as we're kind of like blending this dip up together. I think roasting with a little brush of that Pinot Noir would be amazing. Like really bringing out the sweetness and like the nuance of the wine and really letting it like sing a little bit more while it's in the oven. I think that with something like this, we want to also see like a little bit of acidity, a little bit of that like berry texture that comes with it. So I have a little bit of pomegranate, a little bit of mint. There's some charred lemon in there, which adds this like really big depth. Again, we're talking about contrasting competing flavors and how complementary they can be. And then a little sprig of mint just on top to just kind of like refresh everything. And I think it does wonders with it and works really well with this Pinot Noir.
Oh, this Pinot Noir is from Uco Valley in Argentina. It's vegan certified. It's hand harvested. It's from a Gravity Flow winery. I mean, it's beautifully elegant on your palate. It has this fresh aroma. I love that you've added pomegranate into this because there is a little bit of aroma of pomegranate on here. There's a little bit of, soft violets even in the aromas. You get a little bit of dark flower in here, as well as a little bit of cranberry, on the palate. So you get that acidity, but you're getting that brightness. And I love this dish. The eggplant is rustic. It brings out sort of that very rustic flavor in the Pinot Noir too, but also like contrasts it with some fresh berries as well. It's really quite nice.
I love that.
Okay, so now we're on to our fullest body red of the dish. Amazing. We are on to La Tromenda. Now we are headed over to Spain. La Tremenda just returned to vintages last week for a very limited release. The Alicante region is where this wine is made, and it's a pretty rugged piece of earth. It's the southwest corner of Spain where the vineyard gets a lot of Mediterranean sun and pretty low rainfall. These factors combined with the old vines make for a flavor-packed wine. The winemaker's philosophy is very low intervention and to bring out the natural character of the Monastrell. When you take that approach, and the incredibly predictable weather in southern Spain, you get a consistently delicious wine. This wine is rated 92 points by the Wine Advocate and has gotten that score for every one of their vintages over the last 4 years. You may not have heard of the Great Monastrell before, but you've probably heard of the GSM blend from Southern Rhone.
in France. So the G is for Grenache, S is for Shiraz, and the M is for Mourvedre. In Alicante, they call Mourvedre Monastrell.
And as you can see, we're looking at a fuller bodied wine here. There's 6 months in oak of this wine from old vines as well. And we're looking at darker fruit, but still a freshness. There's a coastal influence here on the side of Spain as well. So we have this amazing acidity that leaves these wines bright and fresh, and they're perfect for food pairings. So what's the recipe for the La Tromenda?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of like full body Spanish reds. I'm such a sucker for them. And it's also seems fitting then that this is one of my favorite dishes. This is grilled carrots with cherries, savory graham crumb, and nasturtium. And I really think this dish kind of like captivates everything that we're trying to talk about here. How can we get creative with vegetables, see them in a different lens? How can we do something that's a little bit more unique and a little bit unexpected with veg so that we're kind of still guessing? It's like, how can we mix it up? I think this dish is like, it's sweet, it's tart. The savory graham crumb is something kind of like a little bit unexpected. The nasturtium provides like a little bit of a mustardy horseradish flavor. And it's kind of touching of like a spectrum of points that really makes this whole dish cohesive. And I think it pairs well with like a really rich, full-bodied red. And again, with like a grilled or like a roasted carrot, once those sugars start to caramelize, something really special starts to happen with it that I think adds a lot of depth to it.
I was just going to say, as soon as you start to grill carrots, I mean, the texture changes, it becomes more creamy. And so that freshness and the brightness in the wine is such an interesting, flavoring, and a different type of sort of compounds are happening on your palate, aren't they? It's like you have this creaminess of the carrot, and then you have the acidity and the brightness of this wine, and it's sort of like a great palate cleanse.
Absolutely. And I think again, like while we're grilling these carrots, can we brush it with a little bit of that red? Can we add a little bit of flavor to it to kind of tie this whole thing together? Maybe we hit it like the cherries are macerating in a little bit of red wine. Who doesn't love that? I think it adds this depth that is like very beautiful and very stunning and a little bit more complexity. I would say one of the last things, and I do actually think that this is crucial, whatever you eat, if you are an omnivore, if you are paleo, if you are whatever, you need to eat your greens, like dark, rich greens. You can be vegan, you can be whatever you want, but like, please eat your greens. I think that that's just like, there's so much nutrients, vitamins, minerals that come from like really rich green things. The sun is just like beaming all this energy into it and like charging up all these greens. This is a great way to get a huge diversity of vitamins and minerals. And I think that what I've found in my plant-based eating is that the more diversity that I'm eating, the more vitamins and minerals that are kind of like, it's like a party inside you. They're all complementing each other. They're all shaking each other's hands. They want to work together. And by kind of like eating the rainbow, which is a point I hammer again and again, that biodiversity and consuming biodiversity just allows for that. I would say like the last thing I try to have in my pantry is like ancient grains. This is kind of where you're getting your protein from in another way. It can be like wheat berry, it can be rye, it can even be farro, barley, stuff like that. It's another textural component. I like to like puff it in some oil so it gives me like a crispy texture. I use it for salads as my go-to. It's really easy to cook. There's a ton of flavor that you can push into it, and it actually goes good with everything. It kind of creates like a very satisfying thing. I've made a risotto from wheat berry before. I've made a risotto from rye berry. I think there's a ton of potential. And kind of similar to the hot sauce, if you have a great vinegar at home, I mean, I love white vinegar, but if you can get like a really lively, vivacious vinegar, I'm going to shout out Acid League in this case, get that. I think that acid is that little bit of like that je ne sais quoi in a dish. People are like, what is this? Acid is that thing that rounds it and just brings the whole thing together.
Well, Matthew, those are some incredible recipes. I think I'm going to get more adventurous in the kitchen. And thank you so much for pulling these together for us.
Thank you so much for having me. I honestly learned a lot, and I'm going to be drinking the rainbow from here on out. Thanks for having me, folks. Eat your veggies. It's just that simple.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. These wines are available at LCBO.com, and recipes will be available by Matthew Ravenscroft on Azure.com. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the night. Cheers.